Zoom. And our guest this evening is, of course, Dr. W.A. Wijewardena, who is a senior Deputy Governor at the Central Bank, now happily retired, and I suppose happy to join us on Newsline Zoom, like he has many times. Good evening to you, Dr. Wijewardena. Thank you.
Good evening, Faraz. Thank you very much for having me on your program.
Excellent. Thank you. It's our pleasure, as always. So I thought I'd call this program the hard slog, because the hard work is due to start now, in the context that the IMF have given us this facility, and I'm sure they've got lots of rules. So what's the latest? Can you give it to us in a nutshell? What's the latest to happen now, Dr. Wijewardena?
Latest, Faraz, is that as there were 9 preconditions which Sri Lanka had to fulfill in order to get the IMF board to approve of the $3 billion extended fund facility. Out of the 9, 8 had been accomplished by the government of Sri Lanka. The last one, there had been actually 2, 3 other last ones. They are now being attended to by the government. In addition to that, to have the program continuing, there are 37 more conditions which Sri Lanka has to fulfill over the next 4.5 year time period. Those are not the easy ones. Those are very difficult ones, because one involves the pruning the government expenditure substantially to generate a surplus in the primary account of the budget. What we mean by the primary account is, if you take the total revenue of the government and you out of the expenditure, you exclude the interest payments, and then the balance expenditure is called the day-to-day government expenditure plus the capital expenditure. The difference between that is called the primary account balance. Now, there we had been in deficit continuously, except in 2018 and 19, we had a very minor surplus there. Now the IMF wants Sri Lanka to have a surplus of close to 1% by 2024. After that, to have a surplus of continuously a surplus there. What it means is we have to curtail the government expenditure substantially. So I have just mentioned one there. The other hard work that we have to do is that everything will depend on Sri Lanka's ability to have its debt restructured. Originally, it was meant only for the bilateral creditors and the commercial creditors, amounting to some $33 billion. But now it appears that the commercial creditors are asking for something called reorganization of the domestic debt as well. The government of Sri Lanka has offered another new concept called optimization of the debt on a voluntary basis, except the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, because Central Bank of Sri Lanka, in terms of the new Central Bank Act, everything that government owes to Central Bank, amounting to some 3 trillion Sri Lanka rupees, be converted to a 10-year negotiable bond, which would be paid by the government at the end of the 10-year period. Then Central Bank is free to sell it in the market if there is a demand for such a bond. So central banks, in the case of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the government will not have to prepay it as and when the treasury bills mature, because it has to be paid only after 10 years. Similarly, the Central Bank and the Minister of Finance has said other creditors of the treasury bills and treasury bonds, namely EPF, ETF, National Savings Bank, Commercial Bank, and the private investors, they also can go for voluntarily, they can go for this optimization program. So what we mean by optimization, Faraz, is that if there's a loss, you have to minimize the loss. If there's a gain, you have to maximize the gain. So since this loss, what the government and the central bank are asking from the investors is, okay, guys, you minimize the losses by going for this optimization program. Voluntary.
So that's that. But the former governor of the central bank, Dr. Indrajit Kumar Swamy, who's now a advisor, I believe, to the president of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, said that this whole renegotiating of these bonds and so on will be accomplished by the end of June. Is that looking on target, do you think?
After Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy made this announcement, there had been a new development. That new development is that the Hamilton Reserve Bank, which is based in St. Kitts in Bahamas, and that bank had taken the government of Sri Lanka to court,
Right.
the Southern District Court of the New York City, asking the government of Sri Lanka to repay in full with interest $250 million US. The total amount will come to about $257 million US with interest, which had been defaulted by the government in July last year. And there was this court case, and the government of Sri Lanka made the preliminary objections, saying that the government is now actually going through a restructuring program, and therefore the government cannot provide any preferential treatment to any creditors because the government is bound to do that. But unfortunately for Sri Lanka government, the government's preliminary objections have now been dismissed. So what it means is we have to fight this case very hard in the courts in USA. And if we win, then it is good for us. But if we lose, then everything will, crumble down to a zero level, and we don't know what we can do.
So in a nutshell, or in short, what is Hamilton Bank asking for? Hamilton Reserve Bank asking for?
Hamilton Reserve Bank had actually, according to that bank, had invested money belonging to its clients. It's not the money belonging to Hamilton Reserve Bank, but on behalf of the clients of the Hamilton Reserve Bank, they have invested in this money in the Sri Lanka international sovereign bonds, because according to that bank, the Sri Lanka government had repeatedly given assurances that it will never be defaulted, it will be repaid on time, and therefore they were given a reasonable assurance that their money is safe. But after the government of Sri Lanka on 12th of April 2022 decided to suspend the repayment of all the commercial credit and the bilateral credit, what happened was the particular ISB, which was to mature in July last year, the Hamilton Reserve Bank and its clients lost it. And remember, the clients, include all the, the small type of people like, the pension funds, provident funds. And therefore, there is a case that, if those people lose, the social implications of a loss is much more than the loss of a rich man. So this is what the Hamilton Reserve Bank is presenting to the courts in New York. And the government of Sri Lanka had made the original objections to that, but that objection has now been dismissed, and therefore the courts will hear the case, and now we have to fight the case, at the courts.
Okay, so it looks like because of the Hamilton Reserve Bank's matter, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy's estimation that things may well get sorted out by June, that may be a little bit unhinged now.
Well, yes, it may. It may be because the Dr. Kumaraswamy would have expected the New York District Court to dismiss the entire case filed by Hamilton Reserve Bank, but now it is being heard. So we'll have to fight that case, and as a result, it will continue to go because there is another important element here for us. That element is the international sovereign bond holders, except the Hamilton Reserve Bank, have organized themselves to an ad hoc group of sovereign bond holders, and they had issued a statement before the IMF approved of the extended fund facility to Sri Lanka on the 20th of March, saying that they are willing to cooperate with the government of Sri Lanka in the debt restructuring. But at the same time, they expect that the domestic debt, which is also not sustainable according to their view, should be reorganized. So there is a difference between now, of course, the word used by the government of Sri Lanka for the bilateral debt and the commercial debt is the debt should be restructured. Now the ad hoc group of the international sovereign bond holders say that should be reorganized. Now what we mean by restructured is that both the creditor and the debtor sit down at a meeting and they decide to restructure. But reorganize means the government of Sri Lanka will do it without asking the debtors, creditors. For example, the creditors here are, in the case of the treasury bonds and treasury bills, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Employees Provident Fund, Employees Trust Fund, National Savings Bank, Insurance Corporation, and Commercial Bank. The government will say, okay, we are going to give you this much and you accept this much. So that's called reorganize. But in the statement updating the bilateral creditors on the 20th of March, both Governor Nandalal Veerasinghe and the Treasury Secretary Wijewardena, they have said that in the case of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the debt amounted to some 3 trillion Sri Lanka rupees will be optimized. In the case of the other people, it's voluntary and they also can join the optimization program without, mandatorily, without telling them that, you should you should go for the kind of debt optimization program. But remember, all the holders of the treasury bills and treasury bonds are all the state sector institutions, the Employees Provident Fund, Employees Trust Fund, National Savings Bank, People's Bank, Bank of Ceylon, Insurance Corporation. So therefore, any voluntary work for us means that the government, Ministry of Finance will have to be behind.
Let's see. Okay, we've got a break coming up, but after the break, perhaps, Dr. Wijewardena, you can explain to me, there are all these wonderful words, like reschedule, reorganize. Well, you just told us about the optimizing bit, but what it all means to the common man, to the man on the street, to me and to you and to everybody else. But in the meantime, let's go for a quick commercial break, to listen to the headlines from the Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
What they fail to do is to present a proper roadmap to the people.
Spend this amount of money for this selection.
Greater clarity and greater information makes politicians' life also easy.
The leader of the party was there. Why are you getting agitated?
What is the point you're trying
Why
to
are you
make?
getting agitated?
The true meaning of democracy.
Face the Nation every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. on TV1.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. I'm in conversation by Zoom with Dr. W.A. Wijewardena, retired happily Senior Deputy Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Now then, Dr. Wijewardena, I was going to ask you, some of these bonds and so on, at one point, some months ago anyway, they were trading at a discount of around 45%, I think, 40%, let's say. So does this mean that when we come to renegotiate, that we can safely expect the bondholders to agree to a discount of 40% and then go on from there?
Well, the discount is much more than Faraz. In the case of the bonds maturing in, say, 2030, $100 bond is being sold right now for some $27 US. So
Wow.
it means the discount is about 70%. But you are correct. If the bondholders will lose 72%, and we can tell them, okay, if you don't agree with us for any restructuring program, you will lose 72%.
Yeah.
But if you agree with us for a haircut of, say, 50%, you will at least, save 50%. So likewise, the Sri Lanka government can use this particular factor as a bargaining point with the commercial creditor. But now, as I have mentioned earlier, because of this Hamilton Reserve Bank case, which is going to be heard by the US courts, we have a problem there also, because now if Hamilton wins the case, then they will get the entire amount of 257 million US dollars. And the other creditors also will say, okay, you have to pay us also the same amount. So we have a problem there. But the fact that the bonds are traded at a deep discount right now means that we cannot get into the commercial international sovereign bond market and borrow again for Sri Lanka. So that is why in the case of the financing gap, which the IMF prepared for submission to its executive board, they have indicated that in year 2027, the Sri Lanka will go for a sovereign bond issue of 1,500 million US dollars. So it has been postponed to 2027 because right now, Sri Lanka cannot issue these bonds in the market and get a good return, because right now the yields are more than 35 to 40%. So 35 to 40% interest is prohibitive for a country like Sri Lanka.
Now, this leads to several other questions then. One of them, of course, is that under the terms of our arrangement with the IMF, we have to build up our reserves. Is that right?
Yeah, we have to build up for that purpose. You see, Faraz, now IMF wants Sri Lanka to buy foreign exchange from the market.
Yes.
Cannot build it out of borrowed money. Now, remember, prior to 2019, Sri Lanka's foreign reserves mainly consisted of what the Sri Lanka had borrowed from outside. And not what Sri Lanka had purchased from the market. Now, buying from the market means Sri Lanka will have to allow the exchange rate to further depreciate, and it cannot go along with the current rate in the market amounting to some, say, 320 rupees per US dollar as the middle rate. It will have to allow the exchange rate to further depreciate, and then there will be a surplus of money available in the bank, in the market, and the government of Sri Lanka to buy it. Now, right now, for the India target is some 1.8 billion US dollars. Sri Lanka will have to buy it from the market and build it up by that amount. Out of that, Sri Lanka has already purchased about, say, 600 million US dollars. But
from the market,
what matters to us, from the market, it has already purchased in the month of March. But of course, month of March and April are unusual months because we get lots of remittances during those 2 months. But the remittances flow will start, declining after April, and therefore there is no prospect of continuing with the same success after April also, unless we allow the exchange rate to depreciate.
Now then, okay, so we have the central bank buying all the dollars that they can from the market because they can't borrow under the IMF, right?
They can borrow, but they cannot borrow and build up the reserve.
Yes, exactly. Well, they can buy, but they can't borrow, quite. But then, if the government, at the moment, the government have severely curtailed the imports, like, for example, the automobile market and the spare parts and so on. So customs revenue is very much down anyway. So if they were to be to relax the import controls, then surely that will have an impact on the foreign exchange.
Exactly. I mean, you are perfectly correct because on average, Sri Lanka's revenue from the import duties is about, say, 5% of the total import bill on average. But that average is misleading for us because in the case of the automobiles, the maximum marginal tax rate, duty rate is about 400%. Right. So so Sri Lanka government is losing heavily as a result of that. And also there is a pressure now building up in the market also that Sri Lanka should, open up the automobile market and therefore the pressure is also coming from the government. But before we open up the automobile market, there are many others that we have to open up. That's the import of the raw materials. For example, in the case of this packing industry. Packing industry, the raw materials are not available for the manufacturers. Plastic industry, the raw materials are not available. Many other industries, we don't have the necessary raw materials available. So as a result, what would happen is that we will have to first give the top priority to the importation of the essential goods for the public, that is food, fertilizers, medicines, then the importation of the raw materials before we touch upon the opening up of the automobile market. So therefore, in my view, that will be the last thing which the government will do.
But it is an important element of our whole economy, isn't it?
Very important element, because if we now open up the import, right now, usually for us in a typical month, import bill amounted to some 1,900 million US dollars.
Right.
That has been curtailed by the government of Sri Lanka through these import controls to about 1,400 million US dollars. But still, we are earning about, say, 1,000 million by way of, visible exports. We have a trade deficit of about, say, 300 million per month, which comes to about, say, 3,000 million per annum. So we have a trade deficit. So at the same time, in the services account and also in the income account, where we have to pay interest on the money that Sri Lanka and the other private sector have borrowed, there's a deficit there. So we have a current account deficit of about, say, 1% of GDP as predicted by the IMF. And that will affect the entire foreign exchange market, because if we have a deficit in the current account, what it means is we have to borrow from someone to finance it, because we don't have any available foreign reserves to finance it. So there the governments and the central banks attempt at building the foreign reserves by buying from the market will be unduly affected as a result of that.
So basically, the foreign exchange market, the rate is going to be quite impacted. So we may not see this gradual decline, and we may even see to a return to the high 370s and maybe approaching the 400 even again.
Well, Faraz, now if you go through very carefully the document presented by the IMF staff to its executive board, I don't want to mention here any number because that may be, misleading. They have actually projected that Sri Lanka rupee will depreciate from the current level to a very high level by year 2027, every year. It's not an appreciation, it's a depreciation, because that depreciation is needed because Sri Lanka's, the number one is that the inflation rate will come down to a single digit level, not immediately by year 2025. At the same time, the Sri Lanka's production capacity as a nation is not in the correct path, because in 2023, in 2022, we had a negative economic growth of some 8%, 2023 some 3%, and since from 24 onward, even the IMF and the World Bank have projected that the Sri Lanka economy will grow very slowly. So when a slowly growing economy is there, you cannot have a strong exchange rate also. So that is why IMF has projected the exchange rate to depreciate substantially over the next 4.5 year time period.
So because we're having negative growth, and then by year 2025 or 6, I think we'll have here you go. It's so the at the moment the government's trying to shrink this economy, right?
Yeah.
So at the moment we have minus 8.7, then we have minus 3. That's I think the IMF prediction for 23, and that gives us minus 11.7 in 2 years. Then we have the 2024 IMF prediction is plus 1.5%.
Very marginal.
Very marginal. And then 2025, it's 2.6%, and 2026, it's 3%. So overall, in 5 years, 7.1%. That's very,
Well,
very
of course,
slow,
we
isn't
will
it?
not reach the level which we had in year 2019 for us. That's the most important, because in 2019,
Yeah.
total size of Sri Lanka's economy in terms of US dollars amounted to some 87 billion
Yeah.
US dollars. Even after this, positive growth which IMF has predicted for Sri Lanka from 2024
Yeah.
onward, by 2027, our total economy would be slightly less than what we were in year 2019. So we have to rebuild our economy from the position of 2019 forward. Of course, with this negative economic growth that we had in 2022 and also that we are going to have in 2023, the total size of the economy, we have gone back to year 2011. We are same as
My
year
goodness.
2011.
We've gone back 11 years.
Yeah. 2011, and also the per capita income has gone down to 3,200. So we have to gradually build up, and we will reach slightly less than the year 2019, as you have, counted these numbers right now, by year 2026. And then also we have to build up Sri Lanka's economy to make it a rich country, as the President Ranil Wickremesinghe wants to make it by year 2048.
People of your vintage and mine, maybe it's time, it's sad because in our twilight years, we find that the country is actually going down instead of leaving it on a high.
No, we cannot say, okay, country has gone down right now.
Yeah.
But if the reforms which the IMF has proposed for the government of Sri Lanka are undertaken faithfully by the government of Sri Lanka, then of course we can expect to have a slow recovery. It's not a fast recovery as anticipated by President Ranil Wickremesinghe, because if Sri Lanka wants to become a rich country by year 2048, our per capita national income, on average, the average income which an individual in Sri Lanka should get should be about 12,000 US dollars. To get this 12,000 US dollars, we have to have an economic growth rate of about 8% from 2027 onwards, year after year till year 2048. Because remember, Sri Lanka's population also grows by 1% every year. When we allow for the growth in the population, the per capita national income will grow by only by 7%. So we need to grow continuously year after year. We call it the compound rate of economic growth till 2048. And for that purpose, all the governments which will have to come to power will have to follow it very faithfully to reach this particular goal of making Sri Lanka a rich country by year 2040.
So, Dr. Wijewardena, is or should and will the focus be on dollars, export, and invest in education and invest in a real commitment to reduce wastage in government?
Well, your prescription is perfectly correct. It should be dollars, plus I can add euros. I can add sterling pounds, or Japanese, whatever the hard foreign currency, not the soft currencies like this Chinese yuan or Russian ruble or Indian rupee. Those are called soft foreign currencies. We need hard. In the case of the economy, we must have investments in the high growth sectors, and also the exports, not only the merchandise exports. We'll have to export the services like the IT services, healthcare services, education services, and all the sectors will have to expand simultaneously. So we must go for a massive plan in order to develop Sri Lanka to a rich country status by year 2040.
Well, that sounds good if we have the commitment. But Dr. W. Wijewardena, we really appreciate your time on our network. Thank you very much. And that is the way it was on Newsline Zoom this wonderful evening. Take care. Have a great evening as much as you can. And of course, God bless you all.